This YouTube channel is a collection of the triumphs through a very difficult and arduous path of self-discovery. Through this path, I noticed that the more willing that I am to sit with the deepest parts of my despair, the more willing that I am to do that for another person. And now I'm noticing that the more willing that I am to open my heart and to witness and to actually have the capacity to take conscious action towards suffering on an even bigger scale, on a world scale. I know this is a very distressing and uncomfortable topic, but I do think that in this contemplation and in these discussions is how we start to pave a path forward into a place of more shared humanity, of true brotherhood and sisterhood, of what it really means to be a human. And it does begin with being able to just start to have these discussions. And so I thought about 5 main points to really condense and think about, why do these things happen? How do we get to the point that we get to? And what is the opposite of that? How do we begin to undo some of it and place in a space that feels manageable? Because otherwise it feels so overwhelming, so powerless, so helpless, that one can easily fall into their own cycle of despair mixed in with the world's, and then or continuing to perpetuate the same energy that is causing the problem to begin with. I also reached out to a friend, this beautiful channel. She does an amazing job of really clearing out and getting out of the way to allow spirit to speak through her. And she channeled a beautiful world meditation for us. So I'm also going to include a link so that after this video, if you feel inspired to do something and you're not exactly sure where to start, the video would be a beautiful place to start. And you can always check out Bridgette's other videos. I find that they just put me in such a beautiful space, this space of everything as well. Even if I don't know the way out, I know that right now I am well. And so I hope if you do feel that pull, that you will check it out after this video. I'm going to talk about 5 main points, what led to this degree of suffering, and what does the opposite dynamic look like? What would be the solution? So the first one that I want to talk about is the ideals over the heart. Ideals over the heart is when we see that there is suffering in the name of, to protect an ideology. Really commonly seen right now in the Middle East, where we have these regimes of power that are brutally upholding religious ideals, completely blind to the humanity aspect. The humanity and the shared humanity is completely lost in this blind protecting of ideals. Ideal taking over empathy. And on such a large scale, it's like, how do you not see that? Like, come on, you cannot tell me that you can't see the hypocrisy. What I would like you to consider for a moment is how this shows up on the individual level, because it seems so difficult to grasp at such a scale. But if you self-examine and you see where in your life you have engaged in that, in an ideal over the heart, then you can have more compassion to understand how it can happen, because all it is just a whole lot of people who have now agreed to a collective group mind that is increasing the magnitude of the same pattern that you can find, that you may perpetuate within yourself, within relationships, and within groups that you're a part of. Consider the equivalence of that on a micro scale. And it's what you can actually control, because part of world suffering and why it's just so dark, so cruel, and it's like, what could I do about that? And it feels just overwhelming. And I know that sometimes in suggesting to look at yourself and your own relationship to things, it may seem like doubtful that that would even be impactful, but we influence our surroundings influence us. There is nothing in this world that it just exists in total isolation. Anytime that we are forcing ourselves to act in accordance to our beliefs over our intuition, or over our conscious, or over our body's needs at the moment, then we are perpetuating that same exact pattern. This can look like pushing through exhaustion, fulfilling a commitment even though it is causing you some sort of pain or doesn't fit with you anymore, but you want to fulfill those commitments. It can look like wanting to win the argument, but you lose the person. Extreme self-giving or extreme self-preserving. When you look at group dynamics, this can look like maybe there's someone in the group who expresses confusion, or maybe they're not 100% in agreement with what the group is saying, and they are dismissed, shunned, seen as a problem. Also, maybe there's a group that prides themselves in, we don't do drama here, we're high vibe only. If somebody brings up a concern or discomfort, then the group decides, well, that's lower vibe and we can't address that. You ask yourself, what is being protected here? Are we protecting the idea of harmony over actually doing the things that would bring harmony? And that's the same thing that you can ask yourself. Like, in taking this action, am I protecting the idea of wellness, or am I doing the actual thing that brings in wellness? Check in with yourself. You can ask yourself, am I creating a space that make room for other people's opinions and emotions? Is this a safe place where somebody could feel like they can divert from the group mind? So there are a few questions that you can ask to periodically check in for this ideals over the heart. And when it comes to yourself, you can ask, why am I doing what I'm doing right now? Is there a systemic flaw possible that we could look at instead of the easy way of just assigning a villain? Are we soothing anxiety by sacrificing a person and like, oh, harmony's been restored, there was nothing wrong here, it was just this person that was wrong? Is that true? Or is there more here? Is there more self-analyzing on how things are being run? Yes, of course, this doesn't mean that there's no accountability, but there's always a care component. Is there a care component, meaning that if there is a genuine question that somebody is not aligned with the group, is there a true, real dialogue where you're open to hearing each other? And is the impact being named, as well as is there a path to rejoin? Is there a path to rejoin? Because all of these things would be signs of conscious group dynamics. Sometimes there is this quiet erosion that there's not one thing that you can say. There's not one, it can't really be named that this is the problem, but it's just felt. And in groups, this can be like little by little, everyone starts to sound the same. You notice that you're feeling like you have to self-censor, that compliance is a requirement for belonging. Then these are all indicators that there could be more awareness that the idea of alignment matters more than the actual steps and actions that need to be taken to align. I mentioned that it is so subtle and so insidious because nobody sets out to create groups that are hypocritical and harm people, especially when their foundation and mission is the opposite of that. Nobody sets out to, I'm going to work on myself and do this personal development journey, and I'm going to do it by being really hard on myself and doing all the things that created a problem to begin with. Nobody does that intentionally. It's so insidious, it's so subtle, and it requires a lot of awareness and humility to check in. This global pattern is not a separate issue. It's just these dynamics that are multiplied, amplified, and there is not a blame here necessary. It's just being open, being aware, and humility. That is how you begin to reconcile relationships, first with yourself. Then maybe if you've noticed that you're doing this to somebody else, if you notice that this is a group thing, then this will help you start to remedy those steps. So asking and checking in with, what is it that I'm trying to protect? What is my body telling me? What is the human need here? What keeps me here? What is keeping me doing this thing? When I'm interacting with someone, am I seeking to understand or just to be heard? Am I bridging connection? Am I making it safe for someone to disagree? Am I making room for somebody else's feelings and opinions? And if you want to check power, there's a really great way to check power in any situation. And one way to check the power is to check who here is expected to adapt. Who is adapting here in order to make this relationship work? If you are the one who is expecting somebody to adapt in order for a relationship to meet, then you hold the power. Sometimes you have to hold the power. You're a parent, to a child, and there's no way to do it. But what's the most conscious way that you can hold power? Or is there a mutual change that needs to happen? Another way to check power is who has less room to express. So who has less room to be heard right now? Who has less room to emote? So who is doing all of the talking, who is doing all of the emoting, and who is directing, that those are all showing you who has the power. And if you're the one who's holding the power, being aware of what you're doing with that power to the other person. It's so simple. You can ask yourself, what would love do? What would care do in this situation? Just signs to slow down and consider impact, consider if you're bridging connection, who you are in a dynamic, and who you want to be. The next thing of why so much violence occurs is outsourcing security or not self resourcing. So, a lot of harm is perpetuated because of fears that lead them, fear of lack, of scarcity, of losing your power, fear that somebody else will harm you. Is this perception that what we need to be happy, protected, well, is threatened by those outside of us. I found personally that when I do meditate, my meditative practices, they help because they put me in this foundation where I know all of those feelings of deep wellness and security, that fundamental base, it's in here. It's not outside of me. It will never be outside of me. And the more that I can feel it and know it and tap into that place of being truly self-resourced, the more that I feel like I'm safe to move around the world because I'm not looking for those things outside of me. And so then I'm not threatened that they're not there, which means that I'm less likely to take reactive and harmful action to those outside of me. I'm more likely to take a more slow, responsive approach than to react out of fear, because fear is what causes us to have those sharp reactions. It's not necessarily an easy feat to do in real time. It's like one thing to feel totally safe and protected in the middle of a blissful meditation and right after, but then you get out into the world and the illusions start to come in and it feels super real and the threats come in and your conditioning kicks in. So this is not just like, oh, you're going to meditate once and all is going to be fine and all your fears are going to go away. It's a practice. But the more willing that you are to engage in that practice, then that's you doing the work and you do it for yourself. But now it's also for everyone else because you're also a much kinder, self resourced person in the world. And there's just no need anymore to perpetuate violence. You start to just really cater to yourself, start to nurture yourself. You nurture yourself instead of suppressing or ignoring or diverting. And so that's why in my previous video I mentioned the Thich Nhat Hanh technique that he talks about, where you take care of whatever comes up. And he explains that, for example, anger is a form of energy, but so is mindfulness, and they both live within you. You have your self-resource mindful self and you have your angry self, and you are both of those things. And so whenever you feel anger, hurt, betrayal, despair, you can, oh, okay, I'm feeling despair right now. And so you can breathe in and say, I know I am in despair. And you can breathe out and you can say, I am taking good care of my despair. You breathe in and say, I know that I feel panicked right now. Breathe out. I'm taking good care of my panic, because you're both of those things. You are the panic and you are the you that is totally untouched. And you're just asking one part of yourself to take care of the other part at that moment. The result is that you stop pointing the finger outside of you. You're the reason that I don't feel good. You're the reason that I'm crying. You're the reason that I feel this. And instead, you start to look at what you can do about it inside and internally. Start to take accountability and responsibility for what you feel. I want to talk about the third point, which is humility. And I mentioned this earlier. Humility is this knowing that we all at many points will act unconsciously and that we will make mistakes. We've all hurt and we've been hurt. And when you take responsibility for your inner states and your emotions, then you're acknowledging your own limitations. That takes humility to do that. It takes incredible strength. The one thing to remember is that you want to maintain your own compassion and kindness to yourself when you're doing this, because humility without the compassion and kindness is just like, I'm just a terrible person. And then you just feel worse about yourself. But now you're perpetuating harm inwardly. It's like being aware doesn't mean that you have to punish yourself for it. And so a lot of suffering is stemming from defensiveness, is like defending yourself. And humility is a gentle voice that says, it's possible that maybe I'm not seeing the whole picture here. And if we ever want any hope of an oppressor to say it's possible that there's something here that I'm not seeing or understanding, it would need humility. to soften. That's the pathway. This willingness to adapt, to reflect, to consider, to listen, having that inner awareness to say, okay, this is obviously not working. I'm hitting a wall and I'm seeing that there's a possibility here that something needs to change. And maybe it's me. Being able to do that is being in a healthy relationship with life, because it's the exact opposite of humility that is sustaining violence. It's that unwillingness to do what I just said, doubling down, not listening, righteousness. So the opposite of this is humility, but on the quiet day-to-day basis, the humility that nobody really sees. It looks very subtle. It's like just being curious and asking more questions. It's about listening a little bit more, considering other and actively seeking other opinions, not losing your own center, not losing your own knowing, but it's a tiny bit more adaptable, staying teachable, like taking pauses. You have to have a whole lot of inner security to do this, because if you don't have inner security, your fear is that I'm going to get swept up. I'll get confused. If I hear other opinions, I'm just going to get confused. I'm going to lose my center. So, in order to do this, you have to have a ton of inner security in that unshakable core and foundation that has been built upon staying with yourself, knowing yourself, practicing and living your values, and knowing what that feels like very truly, knowing what truth feels like to you. That's a requirement. How does humility show up in your life is something you can consider. And that will take me to the next point number 4, which is mindful action instead of reaction. This is a skill. It's built up just like a muscle is. This ability to be triggered and pause instead of reacting. Sometimes witnessing suffering, what I notice is that if you're not conscious, most people who are very actively involved in politics, in social causes, are not practicing this deep inner work necessarily. A lot of them are, but I tend to notice that there's a lot of people who stay, they either collapse or they harden when confronted with suffering, and their own lives are sort of overtaken by their causes, and they become that which they're looking to dismantle. Energy and what they're putting out and what they're emitting, it is just more of that very energy that they're opposing. I can see how it can really consume someone, and how they can loop and stay stuck in this really terrible place. So there's this muscle that gets built up to be able to witness suffering without the collapsing, without the hardening, and just simply being with it. And then in that being, in that spaciousness, one can take action that is more measured, calm, that is balanced and tempered, that is actually fruitful, and is coming from the values of whatever the new, better alternative is to what's happening now. Very last point that I want to talk about is interconnectedness, and it is getting to the root of how suffering occurs. And it is the fact that we have forgotten that we are all connected. There has to be a sense of otherness, not just a sense of otherness, but fearfulness for the other that is causing and perpetuating and holding immense suffering at such a level. When there is a deep and true knowing that all life is connected, then it just doesn't make sense, and there's no desire to want to inflict harm on another person. A lot of spiritual tools bring you to this understanding. Psychedelics bring you to know and experience that for a minute, that feeling of being connected to everything else. Deep meditation practices do. Thich Nhat Hanh explains that even on a practical level, on a material level, that spirituality aside, because it's so difficult to conceptually wrap your head around, like, how can everything be connected? Does that even make sense? If you look at just the elements that make up something. So for example, when you look at a flower, you're looking at a flower, but what that flower is non-flower elements. It is soil, it is sun, it is the gardener, it is the rain, that then manifested into this thing that you're looking at that is a flower. And similarly, you are you, you have your name, but when you look at what has manifested as you, it is your environment, your school, the society, your parents, it is the books and the music that then contribute to this manifestation that looks like you. But you are composed of non-you elements. the more that we tend to the quality of the soil and get adequate sunlight and adequate rain, we are tending to non-flower elements to make the flower bloom. Everything is made up of everything else. The flower is made up of everything of the cosmos, but it doesn't have a separate self. It is just a manifestation of all of those elements. And that's the same thing as every one of us individually. A flower can't exist just on its own in a vacuum without those other things that I discussed, the same way that we can't either. And when you really feel this, when you really know this, then the only thing that makes sense is to take care of everything outside of you. And that is your form of self-care. That's why the next step for me is just finding ways and organizations that are philanthropic but conscious. And that is what I have been actively seeking and looking for at this moment. And if you have any good organizations that you can point me to, please leave those suggestions, because I love the global meditations and I love the world meditations, but I would love to find an organization that takes action and in the same way of what I'm describing, in that conscious way. So non-duality teachings also, Christ consciousness, the idea of loving the neighbor as the self, are all pointing us back to this truth. And that is what I believe is the basis of unity. I'd like to leave us with this snippet from Rupert Spira. So he was asked, he's a non-duality teacher, and somebody asked, if love is my nature, then why don't I like some people? I believe that his response was extremely powerful, and I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. So this is what he said. If I'm watching the news or reading something, and the news has plenty of ideas and behaviors, and often I pause and I look at the image of the sky and I wait, and I have to say, I feel all of my revulsion. I feel this. I deplore what I'm reading, but I just stay with the image until I go through that feeling, until I feel the being of the person, and I just sit there looking at them until I feel that, because I feel if we can't do that, how can we expect them to do that? The reason they're doing what they're doing is because they confine their love to their nearest and dearest, and they hate the people on the other side of the border. And they're willing to do atrocious things to them just because they don't feel they share their being with them, because they think they are other. And what is the remedy for that? It's to feel that they share their being with everyone. So if we can't feel that towards them, how can we possibly hope that one day they will feel that about the people they are persecuting? So it's a very powerful spiritual practice. I sometimes have to work at. Sometimes with some images, there's such a revulsion in me. I don't just smile sweetly at these guys. I feel my reaction, and it takes me some time. I don't want to fake it. I want to really feel it. I want to feel it with that kind of heart-melting compassion towards this person. Sometimes I place myself in the position of their mother. Yeah, that was the end of it. It can sound so ambitious, and there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying that you must be this perfect Christ-like saint or else change won't happen. But there's something powerful about setting your intention there and knowing that that's the kind of being that you want to be in the world. Maybe you don't know how yet. Maybe it feels very ambitious to say that I can love everyone as if they were myself. And for that, first of all, you need to love yourself. Because if you love everyone as if you love yourself, you don't really love yourself. Then you're seeing now where the block is there, right? Not saying that you must be Christ-like. It must not saying you have to be a perfect saint, but you can set your intention there. You can set that this is what I aspire to, and what are the small things that I can do every day, starting with how I treat myself. That could then spiral one day into, my children are seeing this. I'm an example for my nieces and nephews. I'm an example for my neighbors. And you never know the magnitude of the way that things can spiral just from learning how to be at home and in love with yourself, and then extending that outward. So I'm going to go ahead and link now the video to the World Peace Meditation. I hope you enjoy it. It's super beautiful. Much love to all of you. Until next time.